Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano. Joining me this week are both Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson. Fellas, we are 1 week away from the NBA draft. How are we feeling?
Feeling good, man. Got my cup of Joe here, ready to talk about the first round, the second round, what the Pistons are going to do at 5, what they're going to do at 31. Cannot believe we're a week away from the draft. I mean, it's crazy that the finals just ended and we're already talking about, we're already 7 days away from the draft. It sounds like it's going to be a busy one. It sounds like a lot's going to happen. We could be in for some fireworks. So ready to get into it and make some final predictions before next Thursday.
Yeah, Mike, I feel the same way about this draft as I do about my life right in this moment. I'm currently ripping drinks of cold brew and then evening it out with rips off of my vape. So I think for me, that's kind of the same thing I'm feeling about this draft. It's all about meeting in the middle after two extremes come together. That's kind of how I'm feeling. I got so many emotions running through my mind. I'm overly caffeinated, and buddy, I just can't wait.
Well, try to rein in the emotion just for a few moments here while I talk about our sponsor for this week, which of course is BetOnline. And
how can I rein in my emotions when we're talking about BetOnline, Mike?
Fair enough. You could just mute. That normally does just fine. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your info, stats, news, and scores for this sporting season. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports. And BetOnline is your sports information headquarters this season. They've got you covered for all your wagering needs, from basketball, which did just wrap up, but we'll be back before we know it. The NFL, which is right around the corner, Major League Baseball, NHL hockey, which also just ended. Congratulations to the Golden Knights, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games. You can play right from home, but head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, and that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use BetOnline. Again, that promo code is BELIEVE, BLEAV, for 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Well, just saying, for those keeping track at home, I did have Denver in 5, since we're talking betting, since we're talking about all that good stuff. I did have Denver winning this one in 5, and I did win some money on that, fellas.
I also bet on Denver to win, but I did not have them in 5. So, Aaron, I'm going to give you the podcast host winner of the day award from the Palace of Pistons podcast. It's a very prestigious award, only given out once a week, and you're this week's lucky winner. So,
happy to be it.
If we're being honest.
Probably.
Yeah. Can't put a price tag on clout.
That's exactly right. It's honestly quite true, though. Aaron, I really thought you were going to talk about golf. Ricky Fowler went insane today, and Xander Schauffele went insane.
Yeah, no money on either of those guys, but plenty of others. So still 3 days left. But
plenty of time. I am secretly always rooting for Ricky Fowler to win a major.
Oh
wow! You know who else has plenty of time? Monty Williams, because that man has about
I'm talking golf let's get down to business.
I'm like, dude, I think if I ever hit like better than I don't know, 120 on a golf course, that would be like the pinnacle of my golf playing career. So I'm like, I'm much better at talking about sports than I am actually playing them. So I'm like, let's focus back on the stuff that I can actually talk about here. Come on.
Okay, that's a great segue. We talked a lot about Monty Williams last week. We're going to talk a little bit more about him this week as well, because the introductory press conference was this past Tuesday. Williams has added the following assistants to his staff. He's added Stephen Silas, who we touched on a little bit. He's added Dan Burke, who I think was more rumored at that point. He's added Jared Jack, who was at the press conference in Pistons shorts. He's added Mark Bryant. He's added Brian Randall and some player development coaches, including Doc Rivers' son, Spencer Rivers, Jamel McMillan, who I believe is the son of Nate McMillan, and then Steve Scalzi. Don't know if I'm saying that right. I hope so. So the staff is rounding out for Monty Williams, and you're right, he does have time. He has potentially several years, like half a decade, of time to build Detroit into a winner. And it was, we can get into the press conference. I thought it was a very strange sounding press conference between owner and coach and general manager. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but it felt almost combative between Gore and Troy Weaver. It was kind of strange. But overall, I mean, at the end of the day, Monty Williams, the head coach of the Pistons, he's rounding out a pretty nice, well-balanced staff with both offensive and defensive-minded coaches and some smart players like Jared Jack. Any takeaways from the press conference that really struck a chord or anything, or thought was weird?
I don't think anything that was necessarily said at the press conference mattered all too much outside of Tom Gore saying him and Troy Weaver had to be refereed for 5 days over, the decision and the hiring process. Other than that, I thought it was pretty much a waste of time. I don't really think Monty Williams was asked to speak much about anything that truly has much significance, anything like the offensive philosophy, where he sees Cade and Jaden Ivey fitting, like how he plans to build around them, any sort of strategy, roster construction, things like that. A lot of it was more so just kind of PR type stuff about how great Tom Gore is and how great the Pistons are for, putting the money out there and committing this type of money to him and the staff and things like that. So I really don't think anything that was said that really mattered all that much outside of it just kind of feeling like, yeah, Gores and Weavers were really on opposite sides on this decision throughout that process. And Gores definitely made his voice felt and made his decision-making presence felt. I think something that stood out more to me was the people in attendance. I thought it was interesting that essentially the entire Detroit Pistons roster, even guys that are free agents this season but were on the team last year, guys that were on two-way contracts or guys that were signed to 10 days that ended up signing on for the remainder of the season or whatever, were all in attendance. I thought it was telling that guys like Jared Jack were in the building before we knew that they were coming on as assistant coaches. So I thought that was interesting, just some of the people that were there. I think it's interesting that the entire team was there. I don't know if it necessarily means a whole lot, but on the other side of it, I do think that it means something that in the middle of June, guys that aren't guaranteed to be on this roster in 2 weeks are showing up to a press conference, 2 months into their off season. So I don't think a whole lot was said that was meaningful, but I think that the people were there was the most meaningful part for me.
Yeah, Aaron, I'm with you on that. There wasn't necessarily so much that was said, but there was a lot to take away from that press conference. First off, I'm with you 100%. It was very disappointing not to get some more pointed, exact, basketball relevant questions. I'm not taking a shot at anybody, any reporters or anything like that, but look, we've heard so much talk over the last year about these two big lineups. Troy Weaver's gone out there and acquired James Wiseman, not for nothing, for Sadiq Bey. and turned down draft pick compensation in favor of acquiring Wiseman with the express desire of starting him. So for me, not to get a single question to Monty Williams about, just anything really basketball related, like I would have loved to have known what he thinks about two big lineups. What's his philosophy there? You're completely correct in saying like we didn't learn anything there outside of PR stuff. Like, oh, what was enticing to you about Detroit? I'm sorry, I don't care. I'm just being honest. I don't really care. We know what it was. He said it himself. It was the money. What I really want to know is, what is he interested in bringing to Detroit from a tactical perspective? What is his philosophy on both ends of the floor? Where does he see these assistant coaches that he's brought in fitting into the organization? What are their roles going to be? That's a big part of it. And I'm completely with both of you on the fact that, like, all the players showing up, yes, but also all those coaches showing up. I think that was a big deal. Absolutely. And you look at this coaching staff, it's gone from potentially extremely underwhelming in hiring somebody like Kevin Ollie, who has no NBA head coaching experience, to now you're talking about a coaching staff not just led by a former coach of the year in Monty Williams, who has taken his team to the NBA Finals, but you're also talking about a host of experienced assistants and young up-and-comers, like somebody like Jarrett Jack. I've heard about him for a couple years now as a potential NBA coach, not as a head coach, but an assistant coach. Even when he was playing, there was a lot of players who talked about him as if he was a coach out there on the floor, in the way that they talk about like Chauncey Billups when he was playing. So for me, I'm really excited to see that kind of coaching staff together. I'm also definitely at the point where I am wary. Look, I can't say I'm surprised that Troy Weaver and Tom Gores are butting heads. Like, you're talking about a couple of alphas right there. These guys are just, Daddy Troy. We're talking about Party Tom and Daddy Troy chopping it up together, and they're going to have disagreements. That's what happens. I'm not surprised that they had a disagreement. I'm also not surprised that Tom Gores won that argument. He is the owner after all, and he has definitely expressed in the past his desire to win games above all else. We've seen it before with Stan Van Gundy when he pulled the trigger on the Blake Griffin trade. So for me, I look at that. It's not something that I'm surprised by, but I definitely think it's something to keep an eye on. And the fact of the matter is, with Monty Williams getting the contract he got, despite Troy Weaver being extended, if things don't really work out, it's not Monty Williams' head on the chopping block. No. It's Troy Weaver's. And I think we're starting to see how that relationship could unravel, because, again, I don't want to like completely be an armchair psychologist, but boy, it watching the replay of that press conference, it definitely seemed like there was some tension there. Like, you could tell. They basically said, Troy Weaver literally said they had a shouting match with each other about the Monty Williams thing. And everything you heard about, Kevin Ollie and Charles Lee coming out to LA and Tom Gores not being impressed. I definitely think that there's smoke, and where there's smoke, there's fire.
It felt a lot like there's an episode of Succession where the CFO and the special advisor are sort of like sparring during a quarterly or like a annual fiscal event, and they're just jawing at each other on stage in front of all of the stakeholders in this company. It kind of felt like that, where everyone's just sort of looking like, what are they talking about? Because I agree. This sort of like, you use the word unraveled there, and I think that's the right frame, or the right mindset rather. It seemed like it was kind of unraveling. Who's going to get the credit for a Monty Williams hire if it goes well? It's going to be the owner. It's going to be Tom Gores, because he's the one that put his foot down and said, "Nuh-uh, I'm going to open up my pocketbooks. I'm going to pay for a coach that I trust, not one of Troy Weaver's friends. It's going to be me." And it seemed like this was the beginning of a strange sparring match between owner and GM, of like, who gets the credit, or thank goodness I was there to save the day because, now we have Monty Williams and Coach of the Year and NBA Finals head coach instead of a guy like Kevin Ollie, who did take a assistant job with the Brooklyn Nets, and I think that's a much better fit for a guy like him. But it sets up a weird dynamic. I think as the season progresses, when the Pistons are still not a playoff team, and the roster is just a mismatch of players, which, we're obviously going to get into, it's not going to be Monty Williams that gets all the heat. Like you said, it's going to go back to Troy Weaver. And I think that press conference kind of like set up a really strange dynamic for the rest of the season.
I think that there's always been somewhat of a differing philosophy between the two. We know Tom Gores is a guy that wants to win, and we know that he has always been opposed to the idea of a rebuild. I think that we joke about the restore thing, but like I don't think that's fully a Troy Weaver thing. I also think that's partially a Tom Gores thing where like he does not want to be patient. He does not want to take a really long time to rebuild. He wants to win basketball games. And I think as we're progressing in the timeline a little bit more, he's becoming more impatient. I think that there's a really good chance. And to be clear, we don't have the inside information here, but like looking at it from the outside, it definitely seems like Troy Weaver wants to take things slower than Tom Gores does and do things his way, whereas Tom Gores definitely more gravitates towards those splashy moves. He definitely gravitates more towards that instant gratification. And I'm not surprised to see those clashing philosophies as the Pistons get closer to being a good team start to come in conflict with each other more and more.
Aaron, did you notice anything, strange about that dynamic before we go and move into our next topic here? And I guess anything else from this press conference. I mean, it was a lot of PR stuff. It was just nice to see him up there. It was nice to see the players there, like you said. But did you notice any kind of a strange, weird aura that was in the room?
Yeah, I mean, like we've pointed out, it just felt like those two men were not, completely seeing eye to eye. And it's something that we were kind of told, whether we wanted to believe it or not, throughout the interview process, when I believe it was Jake Fisher reported that Tom Gores wasn't impressed when Ali and Charles Lee and Jerron Collins were brought in. And I wasn't, I was told, hey, you can't say that they were butting heads. We don't know that. But I mean, they pretty much told us they were butting heads over this decision. And it's very obvious where each of them stood on each side of the argument. It was pretty obvious who Troy Weaver wanted, and it was pretty obvious who Tom Gores wanted. And yes, when Monty Williams became available, maybe it was easier to go out for Troy Weaver and hire Monty Williams, but it didn't seem like there was a great connection throughout the hiring process, throughout the coaching search. And it was a little bit awkward that having had this search go on for months and having this hire, had been in place now for about a week or so, it was a little odd for them to come out in public and be it was very obvious for everyone to see that they really were not on the same page. And there was maybe a little bit of still animosity towards one another over how everything played out. But some people are going to say we're looking too far into it. I think we're only looking at what we could see and what was said. And I think it's telling that we're all kind of seeing the same stuff that we just talked about.
That's a good point, Aaron. We'll move on, but like I think that's a really good point, saying that like after a week of this hire being finalized, they couldn't come out and really present like a fully united front. Like this is a decision we came to together and blah blah. And they're like skirting around the fact that they had a shouting match. It's something to keep an eye on. I definitely think it's something to keep an eye on, because that's a good point with the timeline. Even like a full week and you're still look like you have an issue with each other. That to me, like you said, we can only evaluate what we're seeing, but it's not a great look.
Let's go ahead and move on to the draft pick that front office and coaching staff are going to be making in just about a week. Now, the Pistons, as many of you already know, they hold the 5th pick in the draft. There's been a ton of smoke about them trading back. There's been plenty of smoke about who they're going to be taking, who they're interested in. And we only have a week until we figure out exactly what that's going to be. But yesterday morning, ESPN's Brian Windhorst mentioned that the Pistons are one of many teams in the top 10 looking to trade their draft pick. And we've talked a little bit about trading back, not a whole lot. I think most of us are kind of resigned to the fact that Detroit's going to make their pick at 5. But I had mentioned right when Monty Williams was hired, if this would expedite the win now window and Detroit would trade their pick. Seems like they could move back and they could still reasonably get a prospect that they really like a Taylor Hendricks or Oscar Thompson. I think he's projected. I've seen him mocked anywhere between 8 and 11 in most mocks.
Mike, really quick, he actually just canceled his workout with the Pacers today. Oscar Thompson did. So I think that there is a pretty big assumption that he's going to Orlando at 6, just for what it's worth.
Okay. All right. Then ignore that comment with that late breaking news. So are you interested in the Pistons trading out of 5? I know way back when I posted a fake trade of Herb Jones and 14 for 5, and we kind of agree that that's probably not enough for 5. But are you guys interested in the Pistons trading out of 5? I mean, it's totally dependent on what they can get, but just the concept of them moving back.
Yeah, I'll tackle this first. I mean, I'm very open to the idea of trading out of 5. I think, and this goes without saying, it has to be for the right package, the right piece. And if you're Detroit, who's trying to get better, who's trying to make an attempt at the playoffs next year, that means you're trying to acquire a winning player, a winning package, and that means you're going to be attaching salary. You're going to be attaching a player or two that's already on the roster to this pick as well. So for me, it's who is Detroit targeting? What is their mindset in trading out of this pick? Are they trading out of this pick to go and get a type of player that's going to come in and contribute right away? Are they trying to trade out of this pick and trying to acquire, a couple more picks? Like, this is a team under Troy Weaver, an organization under Troy Weaver that has consistently added picks in the draft, not drafted out or traded out. They've more so traded in. And, are they trying to move out of 5 for some sort of package where they're getting a couple mid-round first picks? I don't know. For me, I think if I'm trading out, I'm trying to trade out to get a player that's going to help me win. I don't know who that is. I don't think the number 5 pick and anything else that the Pistons are going to be willing to move, not to someone like Pascal Siakam or Jaylen Brown or any of these other players that are kind of being talked about in trade rumors right now. I don't think Bradley Beal's the type of guy that you go and try to get either with what Detroit already has on the roster. So I don't think there's a clear, here's what Detroit's trying to do with 5 if they move out of it. Yes, I think it would be, hey, they're trying to get better, but I don't think there's a clear target for them to go and get with it right now. And when I look at Troy Weaver's history and the fact that he's consistently moving back into drafts and acquiring more picks than he is trading out of them, I just don't foresee them making a move out of 5. I think they'll be drafting at 5.
We keep saying it. Getting the 5th pick was so brutal.
It just ruins everything.
It really, it's not just it takes you out of the ability to get Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller. It has crippled their ability to make an impactful trade because now you have teams ahead of them with better picks like Portland that also have an incentive to trade out of there, and they have the better pick. And so you don't have enough to go out and get a guy like you said, like Bradley Beal or Jaylen Brown, because there is another team ahead of you that also wants to trade for a guy like that. Not that I even think that would be a good trade for the Pistons to make, to be clear. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't think they're at the place where they should be consolidating assets, especially high lottery picks for all-star players. I just don't think they're at that place yet. But yeah, it is tough when you even think about the idea of trading out of the pick. When you think about even trading back, it's also difficult because it's like who is the trade partner there? Indiana doesn't really have any incentive to move up. Orlando doesn't really have very much incentive to move up. And does trading back with Dallas for like the 10th pick, does that really get you to where you want to be? No, I don't think so, because it takes you out of the range of those like 4 to 9 prospects. And I just have a hard time seeing you get like equivalent value. Oh man, it's just a really brutal position for the Pistons to be in. That being said, like I still believe that the best move is just stay pat. Take whoever you can at 5, because the value is not going to be there in a trade, at least based on what we've heard coming out of the NBA news cycle and, you know, what on the surface level appears to be realistic. You know, you're not going to be able to convince a team that the 5th pick is enough to get a good player or a significant haul. And you're also not going to be able to get equivalent value if you trade out of that as well. So yeah, it's I'll keep saying it. It's just like this was a draft, probably even more so than last year's draft, where they really needed to get a top 3 pick and they didn't get it. And it's going to make things a lot more difficult in terms of, you know, getting what you want out of that pick. But it is what it is at this point. And I think you just have to bite the bullet and take whoever you like there.
I think you're going to get some movement by the teams in front of Detroit. The things I've read and the things I've heard from individuals, I feel like there's some smoke with Portland and the New Orleans Pelicans. There was a report that the Pelicans wanted to move up to get Scoot Henderson. If he's there at 3, boy, I really do think that the Blazers are just desperate enough to move the 3rd overall pick and the rights to Scoot for Zion Williamson in some crazy last-ditch attempt to get Damian Lillard to an NBA Finals, or at least deep into the playoffs or something like that. I just feel like something's going to happen. I mean, Houston has kind of come up as like, we don't know if we really want James Harden. I still don't think that has a whole lot of weight to it. I just don't think they want to give him the max, and I don't think Philly wants to give him the max, and he might just have to relent. But I think you're going to see a team move up and get the guy that they want. And Portland is kind of the crux there. I think the Hornets who went out and said Scoot looked so good, Scoot looked amazing, just to drum up more trade interest, you know, just to up the offer a little bit. If somebody did want to try to get 2 and the rights to Scoot Henderson. So, yeah, I mean, the 5th pick just puts the Pistons in such a horrible spot.
I mean, it's a difference of 2 draft spots. And like, that's the difference between you having nothing to work with and potentially getting Zion Williamson. Like, right. Exactly. How more clearly can you look at how disastrous that is for Detroit right there? Like that's just brutal.
We don't want to be Debbie Downers. We did that for the entire season, and I don't want it to become our MO as we head into a new season with renewed optimism. But yeah, getting the 5th pick really did just restrict a lot of potential moves that they could make. And then you're kind of stuck with, do you package 5 and Bogdanovich for something? And what does that look like? Do you package 5 and Bogdanovich and something else to, you know, to go after a real star? And now you're getting rid of NBA level talent to get a star that you hope fits. It's just all just messy. The Pistons do have the draft pick at 31. The first pick in the second round. It's their only pick in the second round as well. I know that a lot of people may sort of tune out as the second round comes in, because the first round is normally where all the action happens, and the second round is just where teams that are wealthy can buy back into the second round to give themselves a few more bullets in the chamber and see if something hits. But the first pick in the second round is still a fairly valuable pick. We have gone over a couple of prospects of who we like at 31. Aaron, I'll let you go first at who you feel would be a good choice for the Pistons to take with the first pick in the second round.
So there's a couple guys that I like in this range, and there's no guarantee that they're going to be available. It feels like I mean, obviously at any point in the draft, guys that are mocked in certain places can jump or fall based on the intel that NBA teams have, based on the risks that NBA teams want to take with certain guys. A couple guys that stand out to me. The first one, 3-year player from Gonzaga, Julian Strother. I just really like what he has right now, and I like what he can bring to the table to a team like the Pistons right away. His shooting is phenomenal. A great catch and shoot guy, a guy that can come off a little bit of movement, come off screens, backpedal and hit threes, space the floor. At 6'7", he's got decent size. He's probably pretty much just a 3. You can maybe play him a little bit as a 2. He can't really stretch up to the 4 right now. He's not long enough or strong enough or athletic enough to really make that big of an impact at that position. But when you're looking for wing help, a team like Detroit does desperately need it, and they need shooting. They need guys that can space the floor. This is a guy that fits well with guards that handle the basketball, are going to draw the attention of the defense in as they start to get the ball towards the rim. Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, those are guys that would fit well with a guy like Strother. And I just think his numbers were so consistent. He's a little bit of that quote-unquote older prospect because he played 3 years at Gonzaga. But I think he brings a lot of good stuff to the table. He can do a little bit more than just shoot on offense. If he gets run off the line, he can get to the rim a little bit. Wouldn't necessarily say it's a super big strength of his in terms of finishing at the rim because, again, he doesn't have that sort of athleticism or burst that's going to make it easier for him to score there. But he has a nice touch, a nice runner, and it's not like he just gets run off the three-point line and becomes invisible out there. Defensively, for some of the same reasons that I've already mentioned, he's going to be a bit challenged. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't give effort, but just the limits of him right now with the speed, the athleticism, these are just the strength. Those are things that he's not necessarily the greatest at, so it impacts his ability to get stops and make plays on the defensive end. That's probably the number one target for Detroit. Another guy that I like, just a guy that can space the floor. I don't know how long Alec Burks is going to be with the Pistons past this upcoming season. I know they picked up his option for next year, but if they want to grab another guard that can kind of try to mold himself off of Burks for a year, so that in a season, if they want to let Burks walk rather than extend him, a guy like Brandon Pojemski from Santa Clara stands out to me. Really, really good shooter there. Not the biggest at 6'4", but again, can make shots. Kind of that off-ball guard. Pretty strong for his size, and again, just a guy that can hit shots, space the floor for Detroit. And I think that those guys are important and type of players that Detroit needs to target when they already have so many guys that are going to dominate possessions, that are going to dominate the basketball, and that are going to command the attention of the defense. These guys are going to space the floor, make defenses pay if they leave them, and it's going to keep them honest, making defenses have to guard them, making life easier for Jaden Ivey, for Cade Cunningham, et cetera, et cetera.
I think the Pistons are in the rare position at 31 to be drafting for fit instead of talent. And the reason for that is because I think that there are about 8 guys who are going to be equivalent talent levels available for them at 31. There's just a lot of talent there. And first off, for what it's worth, I'm coming around to saying I think Cam Whitmore is going to be the pick at 5. And we have talked about Detroit's lack of wings. I mean, for not just this year, but last year as well. It feels like forever. I mean, when's the last time the Pistons had a dominant wing player? It's been a long time. I think the Pistons have an opportunity to perhaps not completely fix their wing problem in the draft, but I think at least they can address it in a meaningful manner. If they go with Whitmore at 5, the great thing about 31 is that there's a lot of small forward, power forward type guys there. I'll just call out a couple that I really like. I think Chris Murray out of Iowa, the Pistons passed up on his brother last year. If he's available there, that is a guy that I think absolutely fits into the mold. I really don't think he's that much worse of a talent than his brother is, honestly. It's kind of crazy to me seeing him mocked so late in the 20s. I think if you want to go with somebody that's less high upside, but you know what you're going to get from him, a guy that everybody who watches the NCAA tournament is going to be really familiar with, Jamie Jacquez Jr. I worry a little bit about how his offensive game might initially transfer to the NBA, as he was asked to do a lot of like grinded out ISO possessions for that team. They didn't have a bunch of guys that could really score for them, and they asked him to do a lot. But the fact that he was able to do it and also maintain a level of efficiency, especially shooting the ball, I think that was really big. You know, he's a good sized player. He's 22 years old. He has experience, and he's really physical. Like, he's just one of those guys that has that it factor as well. I don't think that that's something that you can easily pass up on, even if he doesn't necessarily have like the athletic upside as some of these other players. I think G.G. Jackson out of South Carolina, that is another player that really intrigues me as a raw power forward, 18 years old. He's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from Jacquez. You know, he's the guy that you don't really know what you're going to get from him because he's making poor decisions. He doesn't have great defense, but like you can see physically and in the way that he moves that he has something there. You could even go, if you want to, work on, say, your like shooting guards. Audrey Jackson Jr. out of UConn. I know that there's issues with his shooting. Like, he did not shoot well at all, but he's super athletic. He can pass. He's another guy that just has those intangibles. I'm also with you on Strother. I like Strother a lot. I think Jordan Walsh out of Arkansas is another player that I've seen thrown around. I love what he could potentially bring to Detroit. Talking about a guy with a 7'2" wingspan. You know, he has shown a little bit of like do-it-all ability. He's an awesome defender already. That's another player that I'm really interested in. There's a lot of prospects here that are really intriguing. And I don't know what the Pistons are going to do with the 31st overall pick, but they have an opportunity, like I said, to really make a huge impact on their wing depth during this draft, especially at the small and power forward positions. I'm really hoping that, you know, if they do stick with this pick, because I do think that there's also a possibility that they could trade that pick along with a player for an upgrade. You know, I threw out today Marvin Bagley and the 31st pick for Tobias Harris. I know Philadelphia has expressed interest in moving back into the second round. I think that is something that could work for you as well. But if they do hold on to this pick, they're going to get a talented player. It just comes down to like, what do you want from that pick? Because there's enough talent that you're going to be able to get somebody good that can also immediately fit into your lineup.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of good wing talent available there. You mentioned Audrey Jackson. That's a guy that I had kind of honed in on. Has a pretty good frame, 6'6", 6'9", like 6'10" wingspan. Just has a good feel. He's a very good team defender. He can process the game very well. He's a smarter player. The offense is a bit of a strange point, but he's an excellent cutter. And I think that is something that the offense does miss at times. You have some very good downhill players like Jay Ivey and Cade Cunningham, and you have a handful of okay shooters. But if Jackson is a good cutter, he could really benefit from some of that playmaking that is available on the floor. So a smart player who's a good cutter with a good frame, I think, is probably worth a lot at this point. And with the just dearth of wings that are available at this point, I'd like to see them take a swing on somebody like Jackson. You know, even if he's not as great of a shooter as maybe you'd hope for, he's probably worth a swing in that area. Kobe Brown out of Missouri as well. He's been mocked to a couple teams around 30, 31. I've seen him go as high as 28, but you know, he has, again, pretty good size, has the ability to dribble, pass, and shoot, which at his size is pretty good. He's like 6'7", but has a very large wingspan. But he, again, has a pretty good feel on offense, playing an inside-out game. He's an okay passer, especially off of drives. Doesn't have a whole lot of vertical athleticism, but I think the size, the wingspan, the feel for the game makes him another good pick. And again, you can see where I'm going with this, with wings all the way through. Julian Phillips is 19 and again has pretty good size. 6'7", it's like 6'11" wingspan, but very good athleticism, pretty good vertical leap, and another very good defender. The Pistons were atrocious defensively. Getting lanky wings, young wings that are smart players defensively, I think will go a long way. And Monty Williams will probably feel the same way, especially as he had a lanky wing in Mikal Bridges and turned him into a pretty good player. I know it's not the same spot in the draft, but he likes to mold guys into what he wants to see on defense. So Phillips is not nearly as strong of an offensive player. We don't really know what his offensive role can be. He only shot 23% from three at Tennessee. He didn't look very comfortable at all, even taking those shots. Doesn't really have any game off the bounce right now, but he's 19. He has good size and is a pretty good defender. Might be worth a swing if Brown and Audrey Jackson are not available at 31. And I agree that they might also just move out of this pick, or they might move up a spot or two if they see a guy that they really like that is probably not going to be there in 2 or 3 picks. I wouldn't be surprised to see them package a couple of assets, lower end assets, and move up a spot or 2 or 3 just to get somebody that they feel comfortable taking. But there's a lot of wing options down there, right around between 28 and 35 on most people's big boards. There's a lot of options.
Yeah, and let's say this too. Like, look, Isaiah Livers, we don't know what's ultimately going to happen there. Gabriele Procida from Italy, that's another guy that has been taken with a 2nd round pick for Detroit. Who knows what's going to happen with him? I'm hoping he'll be in Summer League this year. But like, the fact of the matter is, Troy Weaver has not made an impactful pick in the 2nd round yet during his tenure. It just has not happened. And this is the year, I think between the 3 of us, we mentioned like 10 different guys. This is the year where he has to take an impact player at 31. It can't be a draft and stash guy. It can't be maybe in a couple years. It can't be he was injured, he has all these things, but he has upside. No, it has to be an impact player at 31. And there's enough talent there to where you absolutely are going to have a shot at not just one, but multiple impact players at that draft position. So I want to say that too. Like, Troy Weaver has not done a lot with the 2nd round picks. This has to be the 2nd round pick that hits. Like, this has to be the one.
Yeah, I think just to kind of piggyback off that, getting an impact guy at 31 should be possible, because we just rattled off, like you said, 10 names, and I think there's at least 4, 5, 6 guys in this draft range that can come in and impact and play and provide something to this team right away. And maybe they're not asked to do that. Maybe the Pistons end up making some other moves this offseason where these guys aren't. It's not required that they come in and need to produce for them, but the goal should be to get a guy that can come in and produce. And like you said, isn't a draft and stash. It isn't a guy that's going to go down to the G League. Like, if they take a prospect like G.G. Jackson, which I know is a popular name because he was a big time prospect coming in to college basketball, but just did not have the greatest season at South Carolina. He's still super young. Like, I get why the people like him as an upside play, but I think there's more of a need to go get a guy right now with the way this roster is currently constructed that can come in and impact. And I think there's enough names there that are going to be available in some way, shape, or form, whether it's more of a spot-up shooter, whether it's more of a cutter, whether it's more of a team defender. Like, there will be guys there that can come in and contribute. And I think I'd be a little bit disappointed if the Pistons went in a direction where they're instead drafting a guy that's going to stay overseas for a season, or going to spend most of most of the next season in the G League. When I see that this team has some need and has some roster spots they need to fill, and I think there's some guys in the 31 range that can come in and do something for you right away.
And we saw with a lot of teams throughout the playoffs that fringe-ish role players or guys that are not necessarily high-end lottery picks make a big difference for a championship caliber or deep playoff run team. And I think that's a great point. We don't want to see the Pistons do what they did a few years ago and trade multiple or get multiple seconds back for what turned into Kevin Porter Jr. Something like that, where, you know, they should have just taken an impact player when they had the opportunity to, or just take a player instead of kicking the can down the road farther and farther. And yeah, there's a lot of excellent choices available to them at 31. And, you know, I hope that they, you know, have a guy or two in mind that they're willing to move up a spot or 2 or 3, 4, just to demonstrate that they are serious about finding an immediate impact player. It doesn't have to be a knock 'em dead superstar that comes in and lights the world on fire. I mean, obviously that's the ideal outcome, but you know, you can find quality in this part of the draft, or even into the later parts of the second round. I mean, we just saw Taco Bell add Nikola Jokic win an NBA championship. There's hidden gems there if you look hard enough and put them in a good enough position to play. And Monty Williams and this coaching staff that we talked about earlier, they certainly do just that.
I mean, look, how many times have we complained about the wing defense on this team? Like, you bring in somebody like Jordan Walsh, he's instantly going to be one of your best wing defenders. Like, day one, if he steps on the floor, he's going to be one of your best wing defenders. So, like, for me, yeah, like I said before, like, there's just no excuse not to get a guy who is going to be able to step in and complement the players you already have. There's just zero excuse for it.
Right. Guys, I think that was a really solid podcast.
Yeah, sure.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe not.
Well, Mike, you have to remember, I'm swinging off of the extremes here. So I think that this was simultaneously the greatest podcast ever recorded and also an abject disaster that we should all be burned at the stake for. How's that?
Well, we
did
have tech problems.
Believe that, say that. So you're not
Yeah.
wrong in saying that.
Well, we had tech problems because Aaron was cursed by 3 witches that he ran across cooking a big cauldron while he was traveling through the woods. But I mean, hey, it is what it is.
Rain all day at my house. It was gloomy out, and then I walked into my office to record. I'm like, wow, it looks like we're about to get a major storm. And less than 5 minutes into the podcast recording, we lost. I lost power. We lost the recording, so had to battle through some technical difficulties to get you to this show. But we did it because we care. And we love our listeners, so we put on a show nonetheless. Rain or shine.
Oh, you beat me to it, Aaron. I was going to say,
nice.
next week, we're going to be like the Postal Service. It doesn't matter what happens. Rain,
we're going to be
rain, shine, hail, or sleet. What is it the post office motto is? We're going to be delivering hot, fresh podcast content straight to your door, folks. We're also going to have more of our Palace of Pistons previews in terms of prospects that we're looking at for the 5th overall pick.
Great point. Great point.
What can I say, man? The Pistons need to draft a player at 31 who can connect it all together, just like I did right there. That's what they need.
Company man right here.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys pay me the big bucks. I can't say no.
Eamon Thompson's out there, Jarris Walker's out there, and Taylor Hendricks I just wrote and released on Wednesday. So
yeah,
3 of them are out there. We should have one on Whitmore coming, right? I think so.
Yep, we're going to have one in conjunction with this podcast coming out today when you're listening to this, which is going to be Friday, the 16th of June. So please give our written content a look. We like to talk, but we also like to talk via letters, or as it's also known, writing.
Oh Lord. Talk via letters. That's how we're going to be describing it in
I accused
15
somebody
years.
of being obtuse today, and I think that what I just did right there was infinitely more obtuse.
Wow.
On that note, I think we got to wrap this thing up, guys.
Yeah, I think we do have to wrap this up.
Yeah, I'm starting to talk in my head, which is also known as thinking, that it's time for us to wrap this up.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Let's wrap this bad boy up before Jasper starts to try to describe colors to us.
Guys, do you know if Doc Rivers' son also sounds like he eats a pack of cigarettes a day?
We're gonna find out.
I guess so.
Maybe we might find out. I know he does not sound like you. That I do know for sure. It's supposed to be a segue into.
Wait, what was that? I'm not picking up what you're laying down, Mike.
It was supposed to be a segue into you acting as Doc Rivers, but we could gloss right over that. Home. Yeah, it's time.
That's all right. That's poor coaching. That's on me. You know what I mean? The talent has to understand when the person who's telling them what to do, what they have to do their job. And I didn't do, you know what I mean? I didn't do my job. And that's on me.
So it's a little like old Hulk Hogan-y, but I will take it as a way to wrap up this podcast. Fellas, good show. The next time we're talking, the Pistons will have already made their selection with a 5th overall pick, and we will be talking about it on draft night, getting a podcast up and out the door immediately, get our immediate take on what Detroit did, as well as all the impending chaos that is undoubtedly going to be bubbling up the next couple days and then explode all over the NBA landscape. Draft night.
Oh, easy. Mike.
It's true. I think you're stuck in your own head still, going right into the gutter.
I've been watching too many Cameron clips, man.
I think so. I think so.
For at least 5 minutes too long at this point.
We have been wrapping up this podcast for like 10 minutes. So I'm going to actually put the nail in this coffin. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. We hope you'll join us next time when we recap the NBA draft. I'd like to thank our sponsor, BetOnline. And again, you could use our promo code BLEAV, that's Believe, to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit with BetOnline. For my co-host, Aaron Johnson, and Jasper Apollonia, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the podcast. We will see you all next time.